Good morning. My name is Chuki Chen, and today I'm going to tell you how to be an Android expert. What is an expert? Think of somebody who you consider an Android expert. How do you know that she is an expert? Oh, she knows a lot about Android. Okay, that's a valid way of describing that, but how do you know? Perhaps you read the book that she wrote about Android? Or maybe you saw her speak at an Android conference? Maybe she runs a YouTube channel that you always go to learn about Android. Or something much, much more simple in a way. Every time you have a question, you search, and then her blog posts and her Stack Overflow answers keep popping up. So when we think of an expert, we usually think of this dictionary definition, right? And person who has comprehensive and authoritative knowledge in a particular area. So with this definition, we think of experts as people who get put on pedestals to be worshipped and admired. But if we go by the earlier definition that I told you, then experts are just people who share. They maybe write a book, maybe they have been giving talks. So this is one way we can look at this, right? You may think of experts as people who has so much expertise that knowledge just oozes out of them and they just gotta share. There's no choice but to share. But this is not actually how it works. Instead of the arrow going this way, it's backwards. Sharing actually gives you expertise. The more you share, the more you know. And the more you know, the more you get to share. How does that work? A lot of the times when we think that we know something, it's just little pieces of information in our head, and they are kind of all jumbled together. But every time you need to share, you need to explain it to somebody, you kind of tease it apart and line them up in a way that you can explain linearly, right? Our speech just go one word after another. You cannot just bring down a mess and say, look, this is what my knowledge is. When you go through that, you kind of have to sort it out and understand the relationship between all the different concepts, and perhaps realize that, oh, I'm missing a piece, and then you go ahead and learn more about it. So this is now how you can get more expertise by sharing what you know. If you don't believe me, here's some word of wisdom from Aristotle. The one exclusive sign of thorough knowledge is the power of teaching. If you don't think that an old Greek man has any relevance in Android development, try this exercise. Not right now, but go home and go find a friend and explain to him how list view works. How many of you have used list view? List view, all right? Quite a few of you. You may think that you know how list view works, but if you need to actually explain to somebody, what is a list view? What happens when you scroll? Why do we have adapters? Why is this view holder thing? What is it doing? What happens when I click on it, a button inside an item? Do I need a different click listener? List view is complicated. And I guarantee you, if you go through this exercise of sharing, you will know list view way, way better than you thought you could. So hopefully at this point, I have convinced you that sharing indeed will bring you more expertise. I can already hear you say, yeah, sure, it's great, but who has time for that, right? I mean, I have a full-time job, I have a family to take care of, and I have a life to live. Why would I go find some extra time to share my knowledge? But the good news is, sharing actually may save you time. I discovered that sort of by accident. So this is my usual workflow before I start sharing. This is a very nice representation of the architecture of my app. Just a couple of components working together. So one day, I found this new shiny library that is called ice cream cone, just because I can draw an ice cream cone. And I decided, great, I'm going to plop it right into my app. Well, of course, it doesn't quite work because the interface between the ice cream cone and my existing component doesn't just come out of the box. It doesn't come with the box. It's just the ice cream. So I have to build a box around it, right? So I was like, sure, okay, I'll have a little bridge over here, have a little component extra so that I can wrap it around. And then midway through it, I thought, oh, hey, you know what? This is mint ice cream. I want chocolate. So I splashed over some chocolate, and then now it's a mess. Like, I don't understand what I'm doing anymore because my old code, my new code all mingle together. When it doesn't work, is it my code? Is it the new code? I don't know if you have done this before. Many, many times I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? So since I started blogging, I approach it very differently. Every time when I need to have a new library, I go ahead and compile the Hello World example that come with the library, and then I keep them separate until the last moment. Maybe I'm going to change the flavor into chocolate right now so that there's no box to splash around. I know I'm changing it at the right place, right? And then I can go ahead and in a very separate environment, implement all the changes that I need with the main project, but kind of keep it separate so that I build a nice component and I can test it and I know that it works before dropping it in. So this way, I'm actually saving time, right? Because I don't have to debug this new thing within the context of my complex system. I can have it aside and then go ahead and understand what I need, building it step by step in a simpler place. Well, the nice thing about this is that you suddenly have a sample project. You can go ahead and share that because it's separate. It has nothing to do with your code in your own company, which is probably proprietary. On top of that, the process of me changing the library and then adding different logic is a great narrative for the blog post, right? A lot of the time when you go to a GitHub page of an open source project, they always give you this like very contrived toy example, like, oh, if you want to do this one particular way, this is how you do it. But if you share your process of integrating that into a bigger project, other people can benefit as well. So this is one example of a blogging formula that I use. I have a pretty standard procedure of what I do and then what I write. And one great thing about this blogging formula is that I do a lot of screenshotting and doing code snippets. I don't know about you, but as developers, we don't tend to like writing. It's just this hassle that we don't want to do. But one great way of writing is to just include tons of screenshots, right? During the process of building my sample project, I take a lot of screenshots to show step by step how I make it happen. And then I include code because I have to explain how it works. And it takes a lot of space. I mean, not only that, it's a great way of illustrating your points, but once you have this blog and you have a title and then poof, screenshot, some more text, poof, text. It looks like you wrote a lot, but you actually didn't. So like they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So with this blogging formula, you can crank out a 10,000 word article easy, right? Just 5 screenshots and 5 code snippets, done and done. So if you want to learn more about this, I actually wrote a blog post, going very meta. I wrote a blog post about how to write blog posts. If you're interested, my Twitter handle is on the side, and I have scheduled tweets that should be going out automatically as I speak. Don't know if it will actually work, but if you follow me, the link to the article should be there already. So, with that, I'm going to actually introduce you to yet another blogging formula. This one you can use right away. It's a conference report. So all of you are here, so clearly you like going to conferences and learning. But how many of you actually go home and share what you learn? Sure. Oh, one person. Yay. So for the rest of you, this is how you can make it happen much easier. To write an article, it sounds like a lot of work, but we are going to take this concept of embedding content to the next level. Right? So you start the article by a little bit of introduction. So you have to write like a teeny tiny bit, maybe 2 sentences in the beginning. Say, hey, I just went to Android Summit and I learned a lot. Right? 2 sentences done. And next, what you're going to do is instead of writing prose and long paragraphs, there's a really neat trick to turn 140 characters into something very, very nice looking. It is called Twitter. If you put it on Twitter, and then you go back and embed it onto your blog, suddenly instead of taking this much space, it takes this much space. So where do you find tweets to embed? Well, you can write them yourself, right? So for those of you who are looking down on your phone right now, I assume that you're all live tweeting and sharing with the world at this moment what you're learning. So if you are not that kind of person, you don't want to live tweet, that's okay, because If other people are tweeting with the hashtag, which is very conveniently put on the corner of the slide, you can actually go home and search for the hashtag and then see what other people captured and include it. So do it yourself a little bit and then include other people's content, which if you put in 5 different elements of the tweet from the conference, you're almost done. Another trick, going back to what I told you earlier, is pictures. Take a lot of pictures. The nice thing about the fact that you know that you're going to go home and write an article is that you start to pay attention to interesting things. There's a lovely placardboard poster thing right at registration. How many of you saw it? 3 people. See, I saw it because I knew I'm going to go home and write a report on this conference, so I went and took a picture and shared on Twitter at the same time. So, don't all rush there all at once, but you may want to take a picture of that. Other things that you can take picture of are just speakers gesturing wildly on stage with nice background pictures. Things that captures your attention, right? It's like, oh, that's interesting. Just snap a picture. You're not obliged to share it right away. You can go home and then post it. Other things you may want to take is yummy food. I took a picture of the French toast skewer, because I've never seen French toast skewers. Things of that kind. Schwer. Has everybody figured out that poppy thing? Like, what does it do yet? That may be an interesting thing to capture, right? So once you take a picture, literally you don't need to write, right? I took a picture of this French toast skewer and I wrote French toast skewer, hashtag Android Summit 2015, and send, right? Done. So sharing is not as much work as you think once you know these tricks. One other thing that you may want to start at is a little bit more advanced is sketchnoting. I started doing that half a year ago. How many of you have heard of sketchnoting? Oh, more than I thought. So it's just a fancy word to say, instead of taking words line by line on a piece of paper that has already lines drawn for you, you take a piece of paper and you treat it as a 2D canvas, and then you write your words bigger and smaller and maybe doodle a little bit of pictures around it to illustrate your point, to figure out like kind of the relationship between the concepts a little bit more rather than just pretend that you're typing, except you're typing on paper. So it's really fun, and I also have a blog post about it. I don't know if you noticed by now, but I actually blog quite a bit. Again, it will be on my Twitter if you're interested. About what I talk about is actually sketchnoting for engineers, right? Because like Dan's exercise, right? Most of us, when we got asked to draw, we're like, draw? I can't draw. But actually, I tweet it in a different way. I think of sketchnoting as a constraint satisfaction problem. So rather than I cannot draw, so I call it a day and just call it quiz, I think of it as, well, okay, fine, I know how to draw things like that, right? I drew all these things. I can draw boxes, I can draw hearts, I can copy an icon, but that's the classic gallery icon, right, for the picture. And it's a triangle next to a triangle with a circle. I can do that. So by flipping the problem and saying that, how can I express myself with my limited toolbox, I find sketchnoting actually really fun. So go ahead and try that. So with all that content, you have a blog post, essentially. You didn't actually write a 3,000 word essay. You are just embedding what is already there almost. And then, just a few lines at the end. Oh, thank you, organizers, for having such a great event. I look forward to the next edition. Done and done, publish. So again, you can read another blog post about this. Hopefully, by now I have shared with you enough information that you think, yes, I can do this. I can go home and write a blog post. So let's take it to the next level. Let's talk about speaking. I call this taking it to the next level because it's interactive. When you post a blog on the internet, you hope people read it, but you are not sure. But when you speak at an event, there are all these lovely people right there who are listening to you. And the great thing about that is that you get on stage, you share your experience, but it doesn't end there. At the conference, usually after you spoke, people will come up to say, hey, I love your talk. And then you start chatting about what you care about, because they will just jump right into the topic that you shared, rather than, hi, my name is Chuki. I live in Colorado. How are you? And then you spend 2 minutes just getting the ball rolling. If you are a speaker, you essentially made your introduction by getting on stage, and then you can just get to the meat of the conversation and avoid the awkward part. So once I started speaking, I find events much, much more fulfilling. Right? I go there and I know that I will have interesting conversation with people who share my passion. So I highly encourage you to try that out. Now, whenever I tell people that, oh, speaking is lovely, like you get to learn so much and you get to get the most benefit out of going to an event, objection number one is, I have nothing to say. Like, what do I speak about? In fact, it is so common that I have a talk on I have nothing to say. I'm not going to play you this video. Again, link will be on Twitter. What I'm going to show you instead is, no, I'm not actually going to show you a cat video. What I'm going to use this slide for is to ask you a very simple question. Do you get paid to go to work to watch cat videos? If not, you're probably doing something interesting and non-trivial enough that someone wants to pay you to do that. Someone's laughing. Maybe you do watch cat videos all day. But for the rest of you, you are probably paid to design, write code, do some work, right? And when you work, do things always work perfectly? Every time you crank out code, just submit, push to production, done and done, right? Every time, everything works perfectly, because we are just that good. Or maybe it's not your own code. You are using a library, and one day you're like, oh, I need to upgrade it. Did you see the upgrade? Yep. 22 to 23? So subtle, right? Nothing should go wrong. Yes, I hear the laughter. This is not how software engineering works. Things will go wrong. And this is what I do. Whenever something takes longer than I thought it would, I put it in a notebook I call rant book. That's a lovely notebook in front of you. You may not want to use it as your rant book, but you can. So essentially what I do is I just jot down things that didn't go the way I wanted it to go and how I solved the problem. The interesting thing is that I started doing it thinking that, oh, then I'll go back and then see what trends surface and then come up with talk ideas for it. The mere act that I knew I want to write down little pieces of information makes my brain pay attention to different things. Much like the French toast skewer and the banner, I notice shareable tidbits right off the bat without even needing to go back to my notebook. And they turn into blog posts, turn into maybe tweets. Sometimes I just write tweets. I'll write things like, Git rebase -I is the best thing ever, and call it a day and stop right there. But they may turn into bigger sharing. Point is, once you start capturing your thoughts, then your brain just works at the back and noticing things that are interesting, and then one day I guarantee you it'll be like, hey, this looks interesting. I can totally give a talk on that. The subconscious works in interesting ways, so we're just priming it and making sure that it has enough material to work with so that in the shower, that's where ideas come from, you'll be like, yes, I should totally write a blog post about that. So try that. It works. I guarantee you it does work. It just may take a few months, but it does work. So that's objection number one. I have nothing to say. Objection number two. No one wants to listen to me. Who am I? Why would they listen to me? How many of you here run meetups? All right. How many of you are looking for speakers? Oh yeah. This is how it works, right? Like you go to a meetup, happens every month. Where do all those people come from? The meetup organizers are constantly looking for speakers. And it's a very good place to get started on speaking because you don't have to give a 40-minute talk right off the bat. You can start doing a little show and tell, right? Take a little piece of code that you wrote and say, hey, I wanted to do this. This is what I tried and it didn't work, so I tried this and that. So if you're going to use this library, do this and not that. And they get off stage, right? 3 minutes, done. And then you can work yourself up to a little lightning talk where instead of just showing this and that and run away, you can actually have a little bit of a story, a narrative, slides and whatnot, and then slowly work it up to a full talk. Once you did that, you should really consider speaking at a conference. The difference between speaking at a conference and a meetup is the speakers. I am hoping that most of you signed up here because you thought, oh wow, I will learn a lot from the speakers. And guess what? Us speakers learn from each other too, and a lot more. The way it works is this. If you're speaking at a conference, usually there'll be some speaker events, maybe a speaker dinner and things like that. You get to know your fellow speakers. And this is a group of people who go the extra mile and say, you know what? I want to be a part of this community. I want to share what I know. So kind of by definition, they are people who are willing to teach each other. And by meeting them at a conference, well, first of all, you can chat during the conference, like corner them and say, hey, I want to run espresso on a distributed system. How does it work in your company? I mean, because you are a fellow speaker, they kind of give you the benefit of doubt that this is not just random Joe Schmo want me to do his homework. So like they were much more likely to open up and help you. And secondly, the relationship continues. You can follow each other on Twitter or your favorite social network. I mean, I'm not that biased. But then later, when you ask them questions, they already know you, right? So it's much more likely for them to be knowing, oh, okay, I kind of know your situation, and this is how I can help you. This is by far the best perk of speaking at conferences. It's just getting to know the speakers and continuing that relationship. Okay, I hope by now I've convinced you that, great, I want to do this. Like, how do I go and speak at a conference? Usually conferences have this thing called a CFP. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah?
Call for papers.
Call for papers. Great. This is not what I put down. I put down call for proposals. Same difference. The idea is that there's a conference and they're looking for people who are interested to speak. And your job when you submit your proposal is to convince them that this topic is interesting and you should be the person explaining this. So let's kind of break it up. Like, why this topic? And why you? Why this topic? So far my slides are very scant on words, but I'm going to break that up a bit and have a block of text that I'm going to let you read. Read this and then kind of decide for yourself whether you want to go to this talk. The idea is we are trying to reverse engineer, right? Go read a proposal and like, if it's a good one, why do I think it's a good one? All right, just a little bit of time. So who wants to go to this talk? Nobody? Oh, I'm so sad. I'll pick a bad example then. So the idea of this example is that why we want to go to listen to this topic. First of all, it asks you, well, what are the pain points that people are suffering, right? As Android developers, we see so many libraries. Which ones are the ones that I should be using? And once it's established the pain point, it goes ahead and says, don't worry, I got it for you. And in fact, it's very specific. It talks about there'll be 4 different tools that you can use to evaluate libraries to write maintainable applications. And one other trick is that focus on the walkaway. Focus on the takeaway. Like, what can people bring home? And here it says, walk away with the tools you need. One other, this is almost a mind trick level, is you. When you write a proposal, think of it from the point of view of the audience. So don't say things like, I will teach you this and that, and I will be explaining this and that. But say, you will learn this, and you will take home these valuable lessons. So that way, when the audience read it, or the conference organizers read it, say, oh, okay, that sounds like a good thing for everybody to go to. I'm going to accept this proposal. So I was hoping that this will convince you that this is a great talk to go to, but if not, this is actually happening at 11:45 today. So I am going to totally be there because I think it's going to be a great talk. You have to judge for yourself. Plug! All right, so this is kind of one example of how do you make a good proposal. But that's only half of it. The second half is, why you? And why should I listen to you? Just go back to the beginning of the talk. If you have a blog, chances are the conference organizers will go and read it and figure out, hey, who's this person? How does she explain things? And what kind of topics does she get interested in? So by having a blog, you already established a little bit of history of who you are as a teacher almost, right? And with that, What's even better is when you speak at meetups, have it recorded. It doesn't have to be like fancy schmancy, let's hire a cameraman kind of recording, but at least have a recording of you giving your talk so that the conference organizer can try before they buy, right? They can actually have you speaking and say, oh, okay, she actually knows how to explain things in English. That is great, because developers speak is a little bit hard to understand sometimes. Great, with all that, you got your talk accepted to a conference. Yay! Now what? Well, the bad news is you actually have to write your talk, and then you have to go and give it. The good news is that I have a newsletter. Newsletter is a thing now that I write with my friend to share tips and tricks on how do you put on good slides. Hint, hint, blocks of text is not good. People will fall asleep as you did. Have things like high contrast slides so that people can read it, things like that. So we share a lot of different tips and tricks that way. So if you are interested in speaking, I highly recommend that. We also share stories of first-time speakers, people who have not spoken and then speak just to see how they go over that hump. So I think it's a great resource, but hey, I'm biased. With all that, I need to acknowledge the elephant in the room, right? So I started painting a very rosy picture that you'll blog, you will talk, and then you will gain expertise, and the community will love you. Okay, someone snickered. So the problem there is, well, what if people don't like what I write? What if they think my talk is stupid? What if they find out that I'm not an expert, I'm just pretending to be one? Well, for your blog, I have good news and bad news. You have no readers. So the good news is that there's nobody to critique you. I mean, who are you? You're just writing this thing and posting it on some random corner of the internet. So who is there to throw rocks at you? Sorry. So it's a little bit demoralizing that no one's reading, but on the other hand, you have the freedom to experiment before you get famous. And if that is not enough, one thing I highly encourage you to do is to moderate your comments. You don't actually get a lot of hate comment that says, you suck, you wrote poorly, this is not how things are done. But the fact is that that's your corner of the internet. You don't have to tolerate people who are just throwing random junk at you. What I get usually in my comments is just people say, hey, this is great example, but this is not what my class assignment is. So can you do it this way? No, do your own homework. So moderating comment is great in the sense that you can curate what goes onto your blog. And for speaking, that's a little bit different because it's a live performance. And yes, there's usually that annoying guy that's just like, hey, you talk about this, but I know way more about this other thing that I'm just going to tell on with everybody because that way people know that I'm smart. I don't know if you've gone to conferences like that where someone just I'm going to ask a question, but it's not really a question. So my standard response to that is, interesting. I have never encountered that before, but perhaps somebody else in the audience has. And then usually annoying guy number 2 will be like, yeah, me. And then they'll just find it out and I'll be like, so that's one way, which may be a little bit too dramatic for your taste. So another very valid thing to do is just not take questions. It's okay. There's no rule saying that if you give a talk, you have to take live questions. So sometimes, especially if it's a tight talk, I will just say, thank you so much for coming. I won't be taking questions, but feel free to come up to me and we can discuss off stage. And usually at that point, the loud mouth is like, oh, well, there's no audience, whatever. I'm not going to show off my knowledge anymore. And then you get to have a more intimate discussion with people. And if you don't know something, it's okay to say, I don't know. I mean, as a speaker, you are just there to share what you know. You don't have to be a walking encyclopedia of all knowledge of all times, right? If someone asks you something, just say, oh, actually, I don't know about that. But, I mean, maybe you can shoot me an email, I can look into that and things like that. You can admit that you don't know. It's perfectly fine. So with that, I have shared with you a lot of things that I have done over the years, or for 3 years. I haven't actually spoken for that long, of how do I speak and how do I write and make it easy so that I don't dread doing it. And what I really want to emphasize is that by sharing, you gain expertise, and then you get to be a part of a much larger community than you, so that when you need to do something, there are people behind you. With that, I look forward to your conference reports, gave you a formula, and thank you.